Hello there, welcome back to the channel. And have you ever wondered what a homicidal race of machines raining nuclear death from orbit would look like? We're going to explore that today with the Bullethead Centurion. Before we get started, please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and let's get into it. The Cylon Centurions were amongst the most formidable race of machines in a universe or a multiverse of universes that have had some pretty deadly and awful machines. Just look at the droid armies of Star Wars. But one thing those droid armies lacked, aside from sheer numerical strength, was a real bit of intelligence. And this is what differentiates the Cylon Centurion, I think, amongst most of the sci-fi universes. The Centurion was intelligent, even thoughtful. They had individual personalities, and they were just fucking awesome. The Bullethead Centurion specifically was only re-encountered upon the beginning of the second colonial Cylon War, when two of them set foot on the diplomatic outpost right before it was destroyed. The others would be more seen in the systematically annihilating of the human race after the nuclear bombardment of the planets of the colonials. The Centurions, of course, were more resistant to the harsh nuclear environments than the biological synthetic Cylons. But that said, they were still pretty resilient themselves, besides which they could regenerate. It's believed that the Centurion, by the way, lacked this ability. It was simply never built into their technology. Only to the organics and to the raiders, weirdly, was it given. The Centurions were, in their initial form, had a neurocephalic inhibitor, which basically suppressed higher brain functions, meaning they had all the intelligence but none of the personality of a person. Meaning the others, mainly the ones, could control them, worried that they themselves may face an uprising from their own creations. The Centurions. It's not known if they put these inhibitors into the previous generations of Centurion, but I would say it's probably quite likely that the ones managed to find a way to do that, although how they managed to hold them down to do it, who knows. The so-called Bullethead Centurion was about 6 foot tall, had built-in projectile weapons of some kinds built into each arm, and we'll get back to those in just a moment because the arms of this thing are pretty damn cool. The robot had the traditional laser eye scanner of the Cylons, which was a technology originally developed on Caprica and was used as a sort of laser scanning device similar to a cross between a camera and a sensor that most robots used as a means of identifying their surroundings. Now, the Centurion models, of course, had many other upgrades, particularly once the ones were being built by the Cylons came about. They were physically very strong and extremely durable, seen to take considerable punishment and just keep on coming. They, of course, were immune to the vacuum of space, practically immune to bullet fire. I mean, these things were practically indestructible, except for the one that we see Hilo encounter when he is supposedly stranded on Caprica and the Cylons are sort of playing a little game with him, effectively. He's able to take out a Centurion using his handgun, and it is notable that the actual machine goes down, it doesn't just pretend to. Now, considering other Centurions we see throughout the series are able to withstand massive amounts of bullet fire and still keep coming, and a sidearm like his should have just pinged off it and shouldn't be able to do any damage, never mind minor damage, never mind be able to take it down. So there is a possibility that that was a sort of dummy Centurion made with deliberately weakened metal to allow him the ability to think he was still encountering Cylon resistance, but overcoming it and, yay me, I'm a winner, I'm surviving. Whereas in reality they were just simply letting him win. And the Centurion was probably not really trying to kill him. He was probably under orders not to. Now, eventually, between the organic Cylons, a sort of schism would occur, where two factions would be created. Now, they didn't want to lobotomize the raiders, was one faction's point of view, but another faction said no, a raider needs to be a slave, it needs to do as it's told, and if it can't fight, then we'll lobotomize it, limit its higher brain functions, and it can go out and fight again. Next time it won't be able to make any independent decisions. It might reduce its combat effectiveness minimally, but considering there are huge numbers of them, probably not effectively. The Cylons still, of course, massively outnumbered the human race. But the Sixes, in particular, decided that, there is a vote for this we've not considered. So they took out the inhibitors out of the Centurions. This was the first baby steps of the Cylons really evolving as a people and realizing that they shouldn't be keeping the Centurions as indoctrinated slaves. These Centurions both didn't like that the other Centurions still had the inhibitors, but also didn't like the lobotomizing of the raiders. Now, there would be a scene when they first gained their autonomy where they would kill a room full of other organic Cylons. The first Cylon on Cylon true violence since the early days after the armistice between the humans and the Cylons. This, of course, was because the ones had turned on all the others, and they were the ones that destroyed the Sevens and suppressed the memories of the other 6 models, and then put the final 5 back into the colonies to learn a lesson which they would now ultimately not learn. It would be the ones who would go on more of a learning journey, but themselves would not learn. Their human weakness got in the way, effectively. Dean Stockwell, may rest in peace, fantastic actor. Anyway, the Centurion. We see it unleash hell with these sort of chain guns it has in its arms, but if you actually pay attention, there are no spent casings being fired out. Now, I can't imagine that the machine is simply capturing the spent casings to recycle them or something. This says to me that although these guns make quite a bit of noise, and there is a muzzle flash, it's some other form of projectile. Now, my first thought is to say it's some kind of electromagnetic propulsion gun, basically a railgun. There are other alternatives for this form of propulsion. A sort of caseless bullet would be a possibility, where it uses an electrical charge or an other form of chemical discharge to fire the bullets out. There are certain types of guns that sort of stack bullets in the barrel and just sort of deploy them out in rapid succession with increasing levels of power. My guess would be these are some kind of electromagnetic gun, some kind of miniature railgun. Because, of course, Cylon technology had advanced far beyond that of the colonies. It would make sense. It would also explain why there's no spent casings. But even when not using the guns, the Centurion itself was a living weapon. And make no mistake, these were living beings. Just because they were metallic, they were still living, sentient beings, especially once the inhibitor was pulled out. A bit like its read-only processor, right? Which I'm going to do a video on in the future, if you get that reference, to compare those two, because I think it's quite an interesting comparison. Now, the Centurions, once they gain their independence, of course, they turn on them, and it ends up in a big, nice civil war. But, as I said, living weapon, which were used very effectively in the defense of the colonials. They seem to work very well together. This was an example of where humans and Cylons really needed each other. The Centurions and the humans actually fought very well side by side and created a complementary force. The one other weapon I should point out that this robot had that I'm forgetting was the fingers. If you actually looked at the Centurion's hands, although it did have a grasping hand, it could sort of reverse it and flick out a load of blades, and suddenly its hand became a massive load of really Freddy Krueger-like nightmare claws, which could just shred its opponents. I suppose a backup weapon in case its guns went offline or it ran out of ammunition, because they didn't use energy weapons, they were just some kind of projectile. In the end, after helping the colonials find their way to Earth, helping rescue the baby Hera, and destroy the Cylon colony, in what they probably considered to be their own personal revolution, they were completely freed. Not that I suspect that they'd already decided they were getting their freedom anyway, and I don't think anyone could have stopped them if they wanted to. They took the one last known Cylon base ship in existence to forge their own destiny out into deep space, and their tales are yet to be told. And I've mentioned this in previous videos, I would really love to see a continuation of that story, to where those Centurions went and what they did, because they clearly didn't re-evolve into organic forms or even into a more advanced robotic form and then come back for the humans. Clearly these, because they separated on good terms, because they were treated with respect by both their biological Cylon brothers and sisters, but also by their human ancestors, effectively. They learned a lesson that no other Cylon had learned, that you can live in peace. There doesn't have to be war. But to get to that peace, there had to be a lot of war and a lot of death on both sides. Basically the fall of two great civilizations. So, that's in brief. I'm not going to cover individual... There's no really standout Centurion for personality. Maybe the one that Gaius Baltar was trying to tell about religion, which luckily that Centurion was destroyed because no one wanted Baltar getting into their heads. I mean, look what happened with the first Cylons in Caprica. That's what led to the war in the first place. Now, with all that said, that is the major things about the Cylon Centurion. They were a big, strong, armor-plated weapon of death. They may have had some organic components, as they were seen to sort of ooze certain liquids out of their bodies, which means that they probably had, similar to the Raiders, which were seen to have an organic brain hardwired in, they probably had some kind of, at least silicon-based or bio-neural technology in their head, or possibly in their chest. I mean, no one says the brain has to be in the head. They're an android. It could be anywhere. It could be in their foot, for all we know. Probably would be in the chest. The chest would actually make more sense because you could better protect it. Anyway, all that said, that is the end of this video. Now, as I said, I'm not going to talk about every plot point from every episode where you saw every single Centurion and what they did. I think we all know and can agree that Battlestar Galactica, the reimagined and the original series, are bloody awesome. This one is, of course, about the reimagined series mainstay Centurion that we see throughout the series. And they were fucking awesome. I love them. I love that show. And I have mixed feelings about the reboot. Kind of looking forward to it. Want to give it a chance because I want more Battlestar Galactica in my life. Let me know in the comments below if you feel the same or you feel different, or if you love or hate this design or prefer the classic Cylon Centurion design we saw in things like Battlestar Galactica Razor with the Guardians, or just generally the ones we saw in the Colony, or the ones you see in Caprica, the U-87, any of them. Let me know, comments below, discuss. I love all of them equally, but I do have a special place with this one because I do think it's a very, very unique looking android and a unique looking battle droid. And the fact that they were given complexity as characters for being both sentient and suppressed as a minority amongst the other Cylons. They were used as a slave race. In fact, there's probably a different video on this to do, but there's basically a dichotomy there of where the Cylons argued that they were treated as slaves by humans. They went away after the revolution. They evolved into human-formed Cylons and then began to persecute their own kind in a way that even humans had not done. At least humans didn't take away the Cylons' ability to think, but the Cylons did. They took away the Centurion's ability to think, its ability to feel, its ability to love, and its ability to be who it wanted to be and forge its own destiny. And it took humans allying back with them to give that back to them. But let me know what you think about that in the comments below, because I'm rambling again. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you for watching, and bye bye.